First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Arjun Kumar and IMPRI team for putting together such an important course on data analytics. And dear participants, I know you have been very, very active, even when it is an online course. The first time I'm witnessing this much of enthusiasm and interest amongst you. Today, you may find it a bit difficult, a bit different from what earlier lectures have been, because it is about the feminist perspective for data collection and analysis. That is my, and which is now popularly known as data feminism. Now, in data feminism, the most important aspect is feminist principles in scientific inquiry. Now, what are these feminist principles? Because feminist principles, they are for promotion of women's rights, women's dignity, and also creating gender equality in each and every sphere of life. So the process is very important. Process impacts the results of the research, how you conduct your research, how gender responsive you are, how clear you are about your feminist praxis. That's very important. There is no distance between interviewee and interviewer. Like they are from whether they are from similar life situation or a different life situation, you need to reduce interviewer bias in your while you conduct your research, whether it is a survey research or case studies or in-depth analysis. You have to, and that will only ensure increase in the response rate. Feminist research has always been a more interactive, and at the end of the research, you have a more empowering experiences, both for the researchers as well as for the respondents. They are not called subject, they are not called the cases, but they are human beings. You acknowledge their humanness. Feminist research facilitates trust in answering sensitive issues, like whether you are doing research on domestic violence or discrimination at workplace or a caste-based exclusion or any other sensitive issues. And it strives to get a complete knowledge of the subject matter. Now, the feminist principles which guide feminist research, they are most important thing is to make visible and validate the experiences of women, women's experiences, whether in the economy or in the society or in the politics or in the diplomatic, this thing, they remain invisible. Women's experiences don't have any legitimate place in the mainstream discourse. So you need to use your gender lens and validate these experiences through your research. It is also has a tremendous transformative potential, because the whole research is done with the perspective of bringing betterment, bringing better changes and transformative changes in the status of women, status of those who are facing intersectional marginality of caste, class, race, religion, ability, the disability, or geographical location, or language-based barriers that you face. It is a use of conscious subjectivity. That means you know that you as a researcher are privileged, and you have to, that consciousness is very important of your privileges, and that's why the empathy and the solidarity are the principles which guide feminist research. You bring researcher into the research. You can't maintain distance. We have been told in social sciences and that you have to maintain academic distance from the your research subject, which is not which feminist research doesn't believe in, because experiences are extremely important. So experiential knowledge is very important. So researcher has to completely immerse himself or herself in this kind of research, reduce the distance between the researcher and those who are research, and they are human beings. They are also teaching you. The whole process of research is give and take. It is not that you as a specialist know everything, and those whom you are researching, they have to just feed in the data that you want. From the feminist standpoint theory, which is extremely popular, which are recently in the feminist discourses, which talks about the one social location, which structures and limits your knowledge, and knowledge about women generated by quote unquote expert without active participation of women themselves is incomplete and misleading. This is what the feminist research believes in. Today, Dr. Ila Ben Bhatt, founder of SEWA, Self-Employed Women's Organization, she passed away. When she was made Rajya Sabha member in 1986, the first thing she did was to give a mammoth research. It was on a feminist principle of women who are self-employed and women who are in the unorganized sector. And Shram Shakti report, you can download it. It is in a free, it can be freely downloaded. And there are translations of Shram Shakti report in almost all Indian regional languages because this was a love's labor. Everyone. So Shram Shakti report is very different from the and very path-breaking in the sense that it is not only dead statistics and the numbers and percentages which talk about women's location in the Indian economy, but there are case studies, there are very researchers and the whole research team of nearly 30-40 women, women study scholars and experts who are involved in it. The report is interdisciplinary, the involvement of the researcher is so complete in this report that you can see, you can just see the sensitivity and the empathy and solidarity in the report. So Shram Shakti report that way is an example of how the feminist research need to be conducted. Recently, we are talking about the unpaid care work, and there is a time use survey. For the first time, our country came up with a macro level time use survey, TUS. NSSO did that exercise, and it was released in July 2019 in the midst of July 2020 in the midst of lockdown. No? This time use survey also is very exhaustive, and it is very important because the methodology is that of recall method. From when the interview is conducted, 24 hours before that, what all you did during the day, right from the time you got up till you went to your bed. So everyone has an individual personal 24-hour clock, no? And how do you use? And now the work that you do, whether you brush your teeth or you bathe or you watch TV or you eat, that is personal work, okay? Everyone has to do it. Second one is the care work. When you do cooking, cleaning, carrying, animal care, kitchen gardening, collection of fuel, fodder, water, looking after the sick, looking after children, that is called care work. Okay, so that is unpaid. Care work can also be paid work. When you buy water from somebody, it is a paid work. Or when the nurse looks after, or a medical attendant looks after ill person in your house, then it is a paid work. So care work can be both paid work and unpaid care work. And the third work is a wage work. That is, wage work means when you work for money. So your work is divided into 3 segments, which is called personal work, care work, and wage work, or a work for money that you do. So now, in feminist research, the ideology and the power relations are very important. The dominant ideology versus knowledge of the subjugated. I think that comes even in the postmodern ideologues like Foucault, Derrida. They all talked about that what we have, what is handed down to us is a dominant knowledge. And this dominant knowledge is only projecting what the people in economic power, political power, cultural power, educational power they have. But those who are subjugated, those who don't have voice, who were never given mic, who could never climb up the stage, what about their voice? What are their experiences? So the knowledge of the subjugated is a very important mission of the feminist research. Scientific community from the androcentric intellectual legacy, because androcentric intellectual legacy only projects the knowledge construction done by powerful men. And this is a domination of the elitist ideology, about which a lot has been written by Latin American teachers like Paulo Freire or Ivan Illich, that this elitist knowledge, it doesn't capture what is actually there at the ground level. So the research for justification of an elitist perspective about the oppressed caste, ethnicity, oppressed ethnic groups, religious minorities, toiling poor, working class, all these people, the elitist perspective doesn't capture. Plus, overall, like we have a 5,000 years of sexism and misogyny. So the patriarchal prejudices, stereotyping, discrimination, typically against women, and also those who are sexual minorities like LGBTQIA, that is also is rife. The mainstream research is not sensitive to that. Misogyny, which like the dislike or a contempt for or an ingrained prejudice against women, that also comes up in so many researches. So what we need in feminist research respects heterodox views that challenge existing power structure. Okay, so recognizing women's own knowledge, more humane, more interactive, dialogical. It believes in a dialogue. It is not a one-way thing that you just ask questions and the person responds, but that person also can ask you question, and there can be dialogue about certain things about which you have a totally different understanding. Minimizing the disempowerment of the research subjects, those who are at the on whom you are doing the research. No, we call them respondent. So respondent also have an equal right to have a dialogue with the researcher. And it is a participatory human processes that result in a more complete knowledge. So the participatory research is that you are not away from your research subject, but you are very much involved. You have your stake. You also empathize, and you also own. There is an ownership of research by all stake groups. Now, when feminist research started critiquing the traditional research method, because the main critique was that it is a gender blind. So all the research is done in India, say after independence from 1950 to 1970. The research were mostly like let us take an example of women in work. Now, all these researches were guided by role conflict theory. What is role conflict theory? That you accept that every family, there is a family structure is dependent on a division of work where man has a role as a breadwinner and woman has a role as a housewife. Now, if woman starts working, then the whole imbalance is created in the family. So whatever problems you have with your children or in your family or with your in-laws or children becoming antisocial or not failing in exam, everything was attributed to women who are working. So this is called role conflicts, because you are conflicted with your role, because your role is that of a housewife. So this kind of a role, and the same thing about the caste analysis also, the caste-based division of labor. Even in that, there is a lot of critique from the Dalit studies that this kind of thinking of not challenging the existing power structures and power relations, and that is very, very, very problematic. This kind of research is what do they do when they have a status quoist. They are status quoist. They don't want to change. They don't want to challenge patriarchal exploitation. They don't want to challenge caste-based exploitation. They don't want to challenge race-based exploitation. They don't want to challenge any kind of ethnicity-based power relations. So patriarchal norms, and every time there is a problem, what this research is do? They do the victim blaming. Instead of saying that there should be sharing of housework, educated women, why should she give up a job when she knows so much about the issue? It is a advantageous to the country also, but people would blame that the imbalance in the family or a peace and harmony in the family has been affected by this woman who is managing her career. So this kind of outcome, or a Dalit, educated Dalit trying for a white collar job or entering into academia. So the researchers would say that because they are deviating from their age-old division of work, which they have to do is only the manual work, and they have to do the work of Shudras and Atishudras. So this kind of a research, and it was there, okay, in sociology, like the whole analysis for 30 years in sociologists were only obsessed about caste system in India. And so many of them rationalize caste system. So this whole kind of ideological baggage. So there are two aspects to research method. One is the methodology, which is defined by the ideological baggage that you have. Like if you are doing research on a working women, how you prepare your questionnaire. If you start your questionnaire and with the impact of working women on child's life or on her children's life and children's educational performance. No, if you are doing research like that, and if you ask the question, if you have ideological baggage that working women, why should women work? How would you prepare the questionnaire? You would ask the child that said, are you happy that your mother is working? Child will start crying. Oh, no, no, no. Are you getting a hot meal when you come back from the school? Or your mother, is she able to attend all the PTA meetings? This is the way you would frame your question, because your ideological baggage is such that you don't believe that women should have career. But if if you believe in gender equality, if you believe in sharing and caring, you would prepare a different kind of questionnaire. You would ask this child, are you because both your mommy and papa, both of them are working. Is there more income in your house? Or when your mother comes home from work, do you offer her a glass of water? Do you help her in sharing housework? So immediately your way of doing the research also changes. And here the role of social location, where you are as a race, as a class, as a caste, as an ethnicity, as a gender, as a geography, becomes extremely important, whether you are in a rural area or in the urban area or in a peri-urban area, whether you are in Asia or in Europe. That also determines what kind of mental makeup and what kind of priorities and your construction of women's role or every citizen's role is there. Influences of environments are extremely strong on the researchers, because researchers also come from a certain cultural background. They also work under certain institutional framework. They have a historical influences of environment, which generates the social distance. If right from your childhood, if you are told that you should not interact with people from other communities, okay, because there was in Mumbai, when one teacher asked that how many of you have a friends from other religion, right? In the PTA, all the parents protested. They said that this teacher is instigating our children. No. So if this is the kind of thing that you believe in untouchability, or you don't believe, you believe in, you are taught to interact only with people who come from your socio-cultural and economic background. So this baggage you have even as a researcher. And that creates distrust when you are doing research, because if you are going to go in a basti and you go with your middle class biases, no, then it is going to create a lot of distance. They will never trust you, and the kind of data that you will collect will also be colored by your ideological bias. So scientific knowledge is never neutral, as we are told in the positivist approach. It is never neutral. It is socially situated. It is socially constructed. So that is very important. So when it comes to in the feminist research, the most important contribution has been made in the area of invisibility of women's work. And it was in 1974 Towards Equality report, which was presented in Parliament of India, which highlighted the whole question of why there was a continuous declining participation of women. The 71 census had shown only 11% women as a part of the workforce. And then the committee members who had traveled extensively throughout the country, throughout the length and breadth of India, they said, no, but they always saw women working. They were working in the fields and forests and mines and offices and urban centers. And so many, like in the cottage industries, home-based work, small-scale household-based production, they had played a very important role. But their work remained, they were not classified as workers, because the way census question was asked, that what do women in your house do? And they would ask this question to the head of the household, who would say that we don't allow our women to work. Even when the enumerator is watching these women doing n number of tasks, milching animal, doing kitchen gardening. If it's a potter's house, then women would be baking the pots and coloring the pots, or bringing fodder for their animals. They would classify them as non-worker. Okay, so unpaid family work emerged as a very important category, about which a lot of economists started, and especially it was Devaki Jain who first of all did the time utilization study. And unpaid family work became a very important concern, which culminated into time use survey, about which I told you, which government of India has. And currently 84 countries are doing time use survey. So the visibility of women in statistics and indicators became a very important mandate. And this happened mainly because in 1975, 165 countries submitted their status of women's report to the United Nations Economic and Social Status of Women, ECOSOC it is called. And there, same question arose that in most of the countries where women were involved in the subsistence production, which is not monetized, which is not marketed, it was not even treated as a work. And that's why this whole thing about visibility of women in statistics and indicators, whether it is a data about work or migration or the invisible unpaid care work, all these things about which we need data. And political economy of housework, where a lot of work happened, that what way housework, in what way housework done by women was contributing to the national economy, because we know that after the Second World War, there was a massive exodus, like women were asked to get out of the workforce because men had come back from the war. And then these women who were earlier doing full-time work during the war, they became housewife. And what kind of agony that they had to face, because economic independence is a minimum necessary condition for a dignified life. And from that, the whole movement about wages for housework, it was just a metaphor, but it was not that women actually wanted wages from their husband, but it basically that recognition of women's work, mothers' work, very important. Now, interrogating national systems of data collection, this whole exercise started with the census definition of workers, and how to capture women's work, especially using the time use analysis becomes very important. Even the question of migration, when it comes to male migration, they would say men migrate for work. When it comes to women's migration, they would say 85%. I mean, our 2011 census shows that women migrate, the 85% of women migrate due to marriage, because we have a patrilocal system. Women, after marriage, women go to in-laws' place, so which is called migration. But even when they go to their in-laws' place, even when they change their location, they are working, no? But they would not be classified as workers. So, okay, migrant women will always be, and we have seen that even during the lockdown, out of 12 crore migrants, there were 3 crore women migrants, okay, and who are working, and they are migrating for education, migrating for career, migrating for work, okay. There are, and also when whole family migrates, they migrate. Now, when you don't have reflection of women's work in the data system, then what happens? Especially the women-headed household, single women, women who are widows, who are divorcees, who are deserted, they are the main breadwinner of the family. But no policies, no programs, no state intervention, no social protection, no social security measures are created for women, because they are not even perceived. They are perceived. They are the basic, the common understanding would be that the men are looking after them. Men are the breadwinner. Men of the household look after them, which is not the reality. Okay, women-headed household are the poorest of the poor. They are at the bottom of the pyramid of poverty. So a lot of rethinking started because of the group which was created, which was called Economists Interested in Women's Issues Group. It was created in 1982 at the initiative of Professor Devki Jain, and then the data gathering agencies like NSSO, National Family Health Service, Indian Statistical Organization, UN Women, UNDP, Food and Agriculture Organization, International Labour Organization, UN INSTRA, which was the statistical wing of United Nations, all of them made a combined effort to bring gender responsiveness in the data system. So the time use surveys became extremely important. The data collected using time use approach that provide comprehensive description of lifestyle of individuals in terms of how they spend their time in different human activities. That means time use statistics essentially comprise of data on time spent by individuals on all forms of remunerated and unremunerated economic work, because you are doing economic work in a craft, in a house of a craft person, or in a small scale, or in a home-based, household-based production. You would say everybody in the family works, but only head of the household is classified as worker. So unremunerated economic work as a category became very important. on work not considered economic. Okay, so collection of fuel, fodder, water, animal care, or bringing medicines from forest, or looking after a kitchen garden, which also augments family resources, because all these activities, they augment family resources. If these activities are not done, then you would have to pay for those goods as well as services. And third one, this other human activities, okay, like recreational activity, leisure time activity. So you divide your time into these three segments. So initial efforts of conducting time use survey in India go back as early as 70s. And it was in 1983 that National Council of Applied Economic Research conducted time allocation study on a subsample of employment and unemployment survey conducted by 30th round of NSSO. And a pilot survey on time use was also conducted by Directorate of Economics and Statistics, and also Government of Tamil Nadu, like in 1996. So visibilizing and recognizing women's paid and unpaid work became very important. And it was accepted that by failing to recognize women's unpaid work, economic policies may exacerbate poverty and conflict within the households, and ultimately undermining both the gender equity and development. Challenge is to develop and mainstream analytical tools that reflect different economic contributions by men and women. And this depends on, in turn, on wider efforts to recognize gender equity as a key instrument in economic development, as well as an intrinsic good. The compilation of 165 countries report by the UN statistical wing of UN during the decade of 75 to 85, 1975 to 1985, came up with this kind of a slogan called "Women constitute 1/2 of world's population. Women do 2/3 of world's work." Why? Because large majority of women's work remains unpaid. Okay, and they are doing paid work. So paid and unpaid work combined together, it becomes 2/3 of world's work. What they get is a 1/10 of world's income, and women own only 1% of world's wealth. Okay, so that itself shows the kind of skewed power structure and the economic inequality that we have, which is based on gender. So it is in this context that the idea or the mission of creation of a gender disaggregated data, whether it is about the work or about education or about health, about skill development, about political participation and decision making, sex ratio, for every such important areas of human life, we need gender disaggregated data. And we also need gender development index, that when you talk about development, and the indicators of development are education, health, employment, and now also participation in decision making. So even there we need a gender development index and gender empowerment measure, which also takes into consideration indicators called justice and also the decision making, participation in decision making and empowerment. So qualitative aspect becomes very important in feminist research. So quantitative, you do the survey research, okay, which even Shram Shakti report did on a large scale. I have myself filled up form of schedule of Shram Shakti report. Each sitting would take 3 to 4 hours to fill up the form, because it had both quantitative as well as qualitative aspects in the interview schedule. So in qualitative data, what you do is you have in-depth interviews, you also do focus group discussion, you have projective techniques also, and the case studies, the grounded theories, whichever theories that you are, whether it's a standpoint theory or intersectional analysis, action research that you use. Ethnography is also very important, knowing about the community, their culture, their tradition, their history, their legacy. And also observe, like if you are talking about the ASAR report, like ASAR report, which Pratham brings out every year about the ability of students in government schools about reading and writing. How do they do it? They are not only taking data from teachers and students, but they also observe how the classroom situation is, how the teacher is teaching, what kind of interest does it show, why 7th standard girl or a boy is not even able to read the textbook, why 8th standard boy is not even able to solve the simple mathematical exercises of plus and minus and division and multiplication. No? So historical context of qualitative approach in gender research is very important, because to understand that is very, very vital, because qualitative research provides natural context in which individuals and groups function, as it aims to provide an in-depth understanding of real-world problems, and therefore you look for variety in people to describe, explore, and explain phenomena in a real-world context. That violence against women, currently we have seen during pandemic, massive amount of research has happened on gender-based violence, and under what context did it happen? The context of social isolation, context of physical disability, context of being a sexual minorities. Okay, so these are the different kind of nuances that you get through the qualitative research. Qualitative research emerged during the early 20th century as a result of influence of psychoanalysis, because the first researches that were done were about discrimination at workplace, and discrimination and harassment are two sides of the same coin. By 1945, the father of qualitative research, Paul Felix, an Austrian American sociologist, had shown how psychology could provide a framework to interpret human behavior. His studies on influence of mass media on society were highly acclaimed, because where he said that how mass media were perpetuating gender stereotypes. They were strengthening gender stereotypes. And the qualitative approaches adopt emic perspective. There are two approaches in anthropology and ethnography. One is called etic approach. Etic approach is a universalist. You use the same rules for all countries and all cultures and all socioeconomic groups. While the emic approach is a culture specific. Amic perspectives are linked to subjective nature of social reality. They provide insights from perspective of participants, enabling researchers to see things as their informants or respondents do, and explore insider view. So the feminist psychoanalysis is always this, that the researcher doesn't go with the preconceived notion. You are understanding from the respondent what kind of problems they have and under what circumstances. So the qualitative research is understood as interpretive research because it situates meaning and making practices at center of scientific exploration. Instead of searching for generalizable laws, interpretive researchers aim to acknowledge that human action is located within a particular culture and history. Context is the background, environment, setting, framework, or surroundings of the events and occurrences. Basically, context means circumstances forming a background of an event, idea, or statement in such a way as to enable readers to understand narrative or literary piece. So qualitative research reflects on context and subtext in main text. If you see the book, I think it's a highly acclaimed book now. It is a part of a main syllabus in most of the literature departments in our country, which is called Women's Writings in India from 600 BC to the present, which is edited by Susie Taru and K. Lalita. There are 2 volumes, and there were a group of 30 to 40 researchers who were involved in the exercise, which went to like 8 years of research. After that, this whole 2 volumes came out. And these are the extremely important qualitative research which the researchers have done. Massive amount of translations also they did from the original Pali and Hindi and Gujarati and Malayalam, several Indian languages. Second very important work to understand the qualitative research processes is a publication by Stri Shakti Sangatna in Hyderabad, edited by K. Lalita, Vasanta Kannabiran, Rama Malkoti, Uma Maheshwari, Suzy Taru, and Veena Shatrugna. And it came out, it was also a mammoth research of nearly 7 to 10 years, which these women have interviewed women who had taken part in Telangana movement immediately after independence of India. At that time, these women were in their 20s and 30s. By the time they were interviewed, they were in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. We Were Making History is the name of the book, and I think it's a very easily available. And they have used the qualitative research method of in-depth analysis and focus group discussion. Gender perspective in scientific inquiry. In that, you need to remember some of the salient features. One is a process impacts the result of a research. So you have to be very, very judicious in the process, which has to be participatory, gender responsive, and which should not create any kind of a rapport with the research respondent is very important. Interviewees and interviewers from similar life situation to reduce interviewer bias and also increase response rate. That is a highly that is also recommended, but it's not always true. I don't believe. If you have empathy, you can go, like if I have to go to Bangladesh or Africa, it is basically my approach to the research, which is very important. Though I may not be from African country, but my sensitivity to slavery, my sensitivity to racism is very important. In qualitative research, more interactive and empowering experiences which are there, which facilitate trust in answering sensitive issues such as domestic violence, microaggression. Currently, all the corporate Fortune 500 companies are battling with this whole question of microaggression in a day-to-day life. How your competition and the cutthroat culture coupled with misogyny also creates far more difficult situation in your day-to-day work in the office, no? So microaggression, and which is, if it is not challenged, then it also results in sexual harassment at workplace. Social exclusion of sex workers from the mainstream of life. We saw even during the pandemic, they were the ones who were left out of any relief operation. Finally, the research was done by the Janaswasthya Abhiyan, People's Health Assembly, and they, based on that research, they filed case in the Supreme Court of India to get to see to it, to ensure relief kits being given to sex workers in transgender community who were excluded. Structural violence against transgender person, about that also now a lot of qualitative research has come up. The latest issue of Indian Journal of Social Work by TISS is totally dedicated. It is edited by Dr. Ketki Ranade. Very, very important, robust qualitative research is done in that issue. Caste-based exclusion, very important. The Dalit Studies has done it, a pioneering work. Professor Sukhdev Thorat, Dr. Ghanshyam Shah, they have also done massive research on that. In fact, the research on caste-based discrimination and exclusion on the campuses, the volumes edited by Dr. Ghanshyam Shah and Dr. Thorat, I think it's very important. So it provides the complete knowledge. So intersectionality is another very important issue in understanding feminist research, because understanding how aspects of person's social, economic, political identities combine to create different modes of discrimination and privilege. And also the examples of these aspects include gender, caste, class, sex, race, skin color, ethnicity, sexuality, religion, disability, age, physical appearance, and also height. So intersectional perspective keeps into consideration the privileges and the discrimination, enabling environment versus disabling environment according to your social location. So you have to, as a researcher, you have to be sensitive to this kind of intersectional marginalities or intersectional privileges that different citizens and different people in your research have. So principles of, So the approaches in qualitative research can be narrative approach. So you are narrating like a story, phenomenological approach, which examines the processes, the grounded theory, your research enables you to come up with the theory. You don't go with the theoretical framework. You are open to understand from the ground, the reality, ethnography, interacting with the communities, and also in-depth case studies. So it is very the Black feminist research or a post-colonial feminist research or recognizing respondents' own knowledge, that is very, very important in this thing. So the narrative analysis also fights against the victimhood, the whole projecting researcher respondents as a victim, but you need to highlight their agency, how they are trying to striving to challenge the oppressive forces, even when they are in a difficult situation. So the narrative analysis research involves collecting description of events, usually through observations and interviews, and also restoring collecting the background narratives such as essays, diaries, letters, life experiences. They become very important. In phenomenology, the focus is on people's perception of the world. The descriptive phenomenology is focused on subjective experiences of individuals and groups, or in hermeneutic phenomenology, the researcher interprets the meanings found in relation to phenomena. Sharmila Rege's pioneering work called Writing Caste, Writing Gender, Narratives of Dalit Women's Testimony. She went through autobiographies of Dalit women who were inspired by Baba Saheb Ambedkar and who had taken part in Mahar Satyagraha, and how they had a life-changing experience after attending that Satyagraha. And this Sharmila Rege has studied several more, around 27 biographies, and come up with this important research. So the data analysis, when you do in a feminist research, you have both quantitative analysis as well as qualitative analysis, whichever method you use, whether it's a grounded theory or a close reading or a network analysis, or currently there is a lot of popularity of the network analysis, the work done on domestic workers, the work done on dabbawalas who provide tiffin to the Mumbaikars. They have all used that, how the networks are being used for creating their own safe space, and also the employment and all. In a grounded theory, where you talk about the example, identify the potential analytical category, you also come up with how the categories are linked linked together. So your data collection, then you also do the coding of your qualitative data. You also do theoretical sampling, and you come up with your theory. So first you go to the reality, you get exposed to the reality, you do your data collection, you understand the grounded reality, and then evolve your theory. So qualitative methods, in that we have seen that you can have a variety of methods, and you can, in ethnography, you are like the important work by an economist, Esther Bosrup, which brought women's issues center stage. Her book, Women's Role in Economic Growth, that was, though she was an economist, she did not use the mainstream methods of the economists, but she also used a lot of ethnography. She stayed with the African community, and she came up with her understanding of women's contribution in the subsistence economy. So you identify your research question, determine the location of research, formulate presentation method, acquire permissions and access of, because that is very important in the ethics. You had, in the very first day, you had this lecture on research ethics. Observe and participate how people, the labor processes, and how the people's life they are conducted. Interview them, collect archival data from the libraries and archives, and code and analyze data. So that is very important. In the case study method, some of the beautiful, very important case studies done were by the Leela Gulati in the absence of their men. The impact of male migration on women in Kerala, that is very important. Another very important book which was edited by Leela Gulati and Jasudra Bagchi, A Space of Her Own, personal narratives of 12 women, in that women who are in a different kind of socio-cultural and economic location. It is based on the in-depth case study, and then they are also coming out with the theorization and analysis. Work by Urvashi Butalia about what happened to women during partition, because currently the same thing in 200 places conflicts are taking place. Currently we are getting all the narratives of what's happening in other South Asian countries like Sri Lanka, or during the ethnic tension, or Afghanistan currently. So the lot of insights have come from this work on partition in the other side of silence, where feminist researchers from India, they interviewed women who had experience of partition. These are the women who are in their 70s and 80s and 90s. And other side in Pakistan, also Pakistani feminists, they had interviewed, and they came up with a very, very important insights. That qualitative case study method they used, and the narratives in the case study method of the research have been have the perceptiveness, emotional depth, and openness of personal feelings. And these researchers have played a very, very important role in policy planning and also the intervention strategies by the nation states. Participatory action research is also very important, in which you are taking part in the process and which results in a transformation. Okay, so you gather your data, you analyze your data, you share the data with the community and the respondents with whom you are working, and whatever emerges from your research, you also try to act upon it, because you are partner in the research. You and respondents are partner, all stake groups are partners in the research. And then you also, your action, in what way has it brought social change or transformation? That is very important. Now, participatory action research has now been institutionalized even in the official discourse, and so many governments are also promoting it. Principles of feminist participatory action research. First of all, you have to be clear about purpose, whether you want to enhance women's literacy or health-seeking behavior you want to change, or you want to focus on skill building or political participation or employment, or deal with the harassment at workplace. So it's very important. And your research also amplifies women's voice. It also owned by the community. It has intersectional approach. It shifts the power balance from those who are oppressor and exploiter to the people who are those who are at the receiving end. It fosters movement building and collective action, and it also enhances the capacity. Capacity building is very important part of currently about the climate change. A lot of participatory action research is being done by the scientists and environmentalists and social scientists. And also it is free prior, it involves free, prior, and informed consent. You just can't take people for a ride. You have to be transparent about why you are doing this research and what are you aiming at the end of the research. And it also prioritizes safety, care, and solidarity. Your research should not create any kind of disturbance or disempowerment or damage to the people who are responding to your research. So the first tool of participatory research is the landscape mapping. You go and walk the way towards equality report or a Shram Shakti report or national perspective plan from 1988 to 2000 were created. They were also, landscape mapping is very important, knowing them, talking to the people. Second tool can be understanding the life histories of people, going home visits, knowing their life situation. And this also gives you a very, very in-depth analysis, in-depth understanding and insights about the community or people you are researching. So both quantitative and qualitative researches are very, very important in feminist research. They have certain misgivings in qualitative research. The sample size is small, or the subjectivity plays a very important role. The researcher's subjectivity plays very important role. But at the same time, it also provides nuances. So I have told you about both the survey-based research, quantitative research, as well as qualitative research. These are some of very important references. Crenshaw's work on intersectionality or data feminism is also currently very much in vogue, and feminist economists are also working on it. Sandra Harding's work on standpoint, the method of question, on the method question and the standpoint theory. Valsa Koshi's work on action research, Maitreyi Krishnaraj's work on feminist methodology, which I have shared with you, and Bridget's work on guidelines for gender-sensitive research, and Kathy McDonald, Marilyn Kim, Maria Mies, Carolyn Moser, who did on gender planning and policy making. In fact, her research has been used extensively by most of the developing countries' policymakers. And Anne Oakley's work on time use and the housework that she did, the experiments in knowing gender and method in social sciences, they are very, very important insights, and they are in public domain, easily accessible. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share the thoughts on feminist methods of data collection and analysis.